Welcome to The Explainer. You know that feeling? That feeling of being a little bit broken? I think we've all been there. Today, we're going to dive into two really different ways of thinking about that exact feeling. And what's wild is what we can learn when we put them right next to each other.
I mean, it's one of the biggest human questions, right? We're going to explore two answers that, on the surface, couldn't be more different. One comes from a Christian viewpoint on addiction, and the other springs from the neurodiversity movement. Seriously, they feel like they're from completely different worlds. But you'll see, their destinations might be surprisingly similar.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at how they frame the problem. Then, we'll see how one challenges the idea of normal. After that, we'll dig into the roots of the struggle, and finally, we'll compare the paths they suggest for moving forward. Okay, let's jump right in. What's kind of fascinating is that both of these frameworks, as different as they are, actually start in the exact same spot. They both begin by pointing out behaviors or thoughts that just don't fit into what we'd call the norm. And because of that, they both initially place the problem, so to speak, right inside the person.
So check this out. On one side, you've got what author Mark Lacer calls the sin/disease model. It looks at addiction as two things at once. It's a disease, sure, but it's also a sinful behavior. Then, on the other side, you have author Sunny Jane Wise, who's pushing back against that entire way of thinking. They call it the pathology paradigm, which is basically this default assumption that if you're different from the norm, you must be broken or disordered in some way.
And this quote, wow, it really captures that inner turmoil, doesn't it? This idea of a secret side, a hidden part of you that does things you're not proud of. It's that secrecy that just breeds this devastating shame, this feeling of being fundamentally flawed, and a deep fear of anyone ever finding out who you really are. So this is the crucial point, the main takeaway here. It really doesn't matter what the label is, whether you're called a sinner, an addict, or disordered. The experience for the person living it, it's the same. It's shame, it's fear. It's this incredibly painful and deep sense of being all alone. Okay, but what if we've been looking at this all wrong? What if the problem isn't the individual at all? What if the real problem is our very definition of normal? Now that's a game-changing idea, and it's what we're going to get into right now.
This is where the neurodiversity paradigm, as Sunny Jane Wise explains it, just completely flips the script. Think about it. It says that human brains being different is just natural. It's like having different eye colors. The idea of a normal or healthy brain isn't some hard scientific fact. It's a social construct, a made-up idea. So a difference isn't a deficit. It's just a difference.
And this is where you see the huge shift in thinking. The traditional medical model, the one that leads to pathologizing people, it basically says, the problem is inside you, you need to be fixed. But the social model, which is the foundation for neurodiversity, says, nope, hold on a second. It says the individual is fine. The problem is with a society that puts up barriers and refuses to make space for them.
Whoa, okay, that is a really intense quote, and it's meant to be. It's a deliberately powerful comparison. The point isn't to be subtle. It's to make us really stop and think. The argument is that calling a brain normal isn't just a harmless description. It's a value judgment. It's a tool that's been used to say this way is good and that way is bad, creating a power imbalance. So we've got these two totally different definitions of what the problem even is. That leads to the next big question, right? Where does each side say this struggle begins? Let's dig in and see where they trace the roots. All right, so Lasser's framework points inward, directly at the family. It paints a picture of a family system that's just not healthy. You've got unclear or overly strict boundaries. These unspoken rules, like don't talk about your feelings. And everyone's trapped in a specific role. All of this, it argues, creates these really deep emotional wounds. And addiction? Well, that's seen as a way to try and numb that pain. And then, in a complete 180, Wise's framework looks outward, not at the family, but at the entire society. The argument here is that the root cause isn't a personal wound. It's an oppressive culture. These things you see listed, perfectionism, that constant rush, these aren't just personality quirks. They're seen as the building blocks of what's called neuronormativity, basically a super rigid set of expectations for how a normal person should operate. And if you don't fit that mold, The system itself punishes you for it.
And there it is. Lay it out perfectly. It's the core difference. Is the struggle a reaction to very personal, very specific trauma within a family, an effort to escape those wounds? Or is it a completely logical reaction to the crushing, impersonal pressure of a system that wasn't built for you in the first place?
All right, so we've got two completely different diagnoses, right? Different problems, different roots. You'd expect the solutions to be worlds apart too. But this is where things get really, really interesting. This is where we see a surprising and, I think, pretty powerful overlap.
So in Lasser's model, the way forward is all about personal accountability, but in a very structured way. The whole process is actually modeled after the story of Nehemiah rebuilding the walls of a ruined city. You start by facing the sadness, the brokenness. Then you confess, you repent. You actively clear out the rubble of your life, and then you start building something new, something better, with a focus on serving others.
Now, the neurodiversity path is totally different. It's not about rebuilding the person, it's about redesigning the environment. The key idea here is universal design, and it's so simple yet so profound. What if we stopped trying to fix people and instead focused on fixing the places and systems that are disabling them? The goal is to create spaces, schools, workplaces, communities, where absolutely everyone can show up and succeed.
Okay, and here it is. This is the moment where it all comes together. Forget the vocabulary for a second. Put aside whether the words are religious or sociological. When you strip all that away, you realize both paths are actually reaching for the exact same thing. They're both trying to meet the same deep-seated human needs. Look at this. At the heart of it all, both of these frameworks are really about finding a way out of isolation and shame. They both say, loud and clear, that you absolutely need community. It doesn't matter if you call it the family of God or the neurodivergent community. And they both agree that real healing, real progress, comes from accountability, from being understood, and from that ultimate goal, acceptance. So that kind of leaves us with this big question, doesn't it? The frameworks we use, the language we choose, that all changes over time. But does that fundamental human need for community, for understanding, for genuine acceptance, does that ever change? Maybe, just maybe, we're all just searching for the very same thing. A place where we can finally belong, just as we are.